Be sure to go to flipsidegaming.com and use promo code 6 for 10% off on orders over $10. Do the same with the Grizzly Gentlemen. They're both fantastic deals and they help support the show. What is up, Planeswalkers? Therox 6 back with, I believe, my final day of pre-recorded videos. And we're going to finish this one off with the rest of the cards in my huge list of cards I would like to see potentially come to Arena. Mostly for Death and Taxes purposes, but just because I think that they're pretty cool cards. Blinding Angel, we're going to go from 5s and go to the rest. Blinding Angel is kind of interesting. It's a 5-mana 2/4, which is actually not great stats, but when it deals combat damage to a player, that player skips his or her next combat phase. This is kind of a really slow card, but one of the reasons I like it is because of the fact that it could be seeing play in like the sideboard of some Angel decks, right? Potentially speaking, if we can get some other Angels, some that are more aggressive and then some that are more defensive, then you could have an Angel deck that actually involves a number of like decent options. I think it's just pretty cool. This is not supposed to be here. Awkward. Pentax Paladin, I just really like this card because it's very cool. And it's a slow card. Like, this card is fair. 5 mana for a 3/3 with triple white pips that doesn't do anything on ETB other than you choose a color. It is flanking, which is cool. Like, sure, maybe some people would be annoyed that flanking is here, whatever. But you get to pay 2 white pips and tap it to destroy a permanent of the chosen color. Maybe Wizards wouldn't like this because of the fact that it's just like really annoying if you're playing a monocolor deck and you come up against this. But at the same time, we're talking about white. We're talking about the white portion of the color pie. Not exactly in the top position. Revlark is a really awesome card. Honestly, this isn't even really... It's pretty decent for Death and Taxes. The main issue, of course, is that it's 5 mana for a 4/3. And you have to hope that it leaves. You can evoke it, but that's 6 mana. Even though that's only 1 more, the difference between 5 and 6 mana is actually quite large. But the fact that it gets you 2 creatures back is just great, especially considering the fact that almost all of the creatures in your Death and Taxes deck are going to be 2 or less. What else I like about this card is that helps out like Brawl and stuff. It's cool. So Shattered Angel, I wish we had like the opposite version of this, right? Still white, still a 5 mana 3/3 flying angel, but it's whenever an opponent, whenever a land enters the battlefield under opponent's control, they lose 3 life. That'd be so much better. Then we can finally punish these land decks. As is, it doesn't actually do much to stop those decks, but whatever. 5 mana, 3/3 elephant. Whenever an opponent plays a spell, that player sacrifices a permanent unless he or she pays 1, unless they pay 1. This card is more funny. The majority of the 5 CMC cards are kind of more memes. They're not actually going to be as likely to help any real constructed Death and Taxes list. Although 5 is still where you can run some cards for Death and Taxes. You just need to make sure that those cards are going to be doing something super impactful. Like I would consider these 2 impactful enough that they're worth playing. This one is a little slow. These 2 don't do anything when they enter, and their abilities are probably marginal, especially compared to their bodies. But you know, I would like to see more things like this, maybe at a lower CMC. Thalia's Lancers is a 5 mana 4/4 with First Strike. What's really nice about this is the fact that you can go grab a legendary card, and although obviously this is a human and a knight and helps those decks accordingly, what you can do here is you can build this into a more toolboxy Death and Taxes list, even one that isn't just mono white. I can see a situation in which you're playing, you know, maybe Abzan, and you are able to go get things like Cabal, but you're also able to go get, you know, Yasharn. You can grab Shalai, you can grab Kunaros, right? These are all a bunch of different things that you can go and grab from your deck in order to help out your general gameplay. Now, obviously, this does cost 5 mana, but its body isn't terrible, and you do get an immediate benefit, right? You're still going up this card. So if this entered, you'd still have a toolbox. What's nice about this card, above a lot of the other cards here, is that this card is likely to come back. Depending, of course, on whether or not Wizards decides to have a garbage Shadows of Innistrad remastered. If they treat it like the other remasters, then we could easily see a situation where this card doesn't come back. I'd like it to come back because I really would like to at least try to build some sort of Abzan, most likely Abzan. I can't think of too many. I mean, honestly, you could even No, you couldn't go super crazy with it. You would still have to have a core, but you'd have like good sideboard choices, and then you have some main deck options. But I'd like to try and have some toolkitting here, even if this is just a 2-of, right? It's still possibly fine. Voidstone Gargoyle is just essentially a way to have kind of like Gideon's Intervention or whatever. It's a 5-mana 3/3 flyer. You know, the body, you wish it was better, but whatever. You get to name a card. That card can't be played. Cool. Activated abilities of permanents with that name can't be played. Activated abilities of cards with that name that aren't in play can't be played. So this actually does a decent amount of things, right? Obviously, the fact that they just can't play that card is great, right? You have a situation where you're essentially getting into Intervention, except this is a creature. If they're already on the field, right? If it's a Planeswalker, this still hits it, right? You know, if they have an Embercleave or something, you can name that, and now they can't equip it. Obviously, if it's already equipped, you have to deal with that, but they can't equip it. And then things that are like in graveyards or in hands, right? They can't cycle. If you say Shark Typhoon or something, they can't cast any. You know, they can't use a Flashback or something. No, Flashback isn't an activated ability, but still, you know, there are other cards on Arena that this cares about. I just think it's a cool card. Wingmate Rock. I played during this. I played in Standard during this, and I really liked Wingmate Rock. It's just cool, man. it's not great. This card is like, Wizards is never gonna play it, which makes me sad, because this destroys lands. 5 mana, 4/4. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may choose a card type. If you do, each player sacrifices a permanent of the card type. I want to be in a world where I can just force people to sacrifice things. It's great. Deathless Angel, target creatures in a circle this turn. And only 6 mana for a 5/7, so that's not terrible. Obviously, this is cool angel stuff, but also this is just an additional way to protect your creatures while also being larger. It's not going to see any play, but still. Linvala. Linvala is another one of those cases that, you know, it's relatively likely that we're going to see this sooner rather than later, because it is within the recent past. It does some cool things. If your opponent has, essentially, it's like the beefed up version of Timely Reinforcements. You get to have an additional angel if your opponents control more creatures, and you get to have an additional 5 life. I've put Thragtusk into Death and Taxes decks before, into the sideboards, and Linvala is also decent. Cost, as I said earlier, 5 mana to 6 mana is a huge deal, but the fact remains that it's a cool card, and I want to see it. Purity was funny. I don't remember exactly why I put it in here. I think I actually put this in here initially for a combo, but I've forgotten about it. Sun Titan's great. Being able to reuse like ghost quarters and stuff, since we don't have Leonin Arbiter, having the ability to reuse your ghost quarters and stuff is quite nice. Obviously, the fact that the majority of our cards are CMC 3 or less means that we can also just like get back our own creatures. So having something like Sacrifice Dog, Selfless Savior, you can, you know, attack with Sun Titan. If they decide to try and blow it up, you get to sack it, and then on the following turn, you can get it back. It just does a lot of cool things, and it can give you some lines that you otherwise wouldn't have access to. Twilight Shepherd is a very fun card because it helps you stave off board wipes, and that's one of the things that I've talked about in a majority of my Death and Taxes lists, is that you really want to be able, since you're a creature deck, you want to be able to stop yourself from just losing to a single board wipe. Things like Luminous Broodmoth, I do like. However, a lot of my lists, especially right now with Archon, have a lot of creatures that already fly. In the black deck, we are running the demon, whose name I'm forgetting right now, but that demon, you know, that demon's only in the black deck. So being able to have this card, which will help all of your creatures, is quite nice. Now that does put it in hand, and this does cost 6, so it's not always going to be great, but it is still something that you'd have an option for. Also, the artist is great. I want more Jason Chan art in my life. Yossei's just funny and mean. I don't remember why I put this in here. Chalice of the Void. So we're going to actually start getting back into cards that are more likely to matter. Some of the 5 drops and 6 drops are a little bit more memey, but now we're getting to the meat and the potatoes. Chalice of the Void. allows us to just say, I don't want my opponent doing something at a certain CMC. Even though our format is less narrow in terms of CMC than, Vintage, Legacy, Modern, Pioneer even, I don't know, Pioneer. Imagine, right, Chalice on 2 against a Sultai deck. Chalice on 1 against Gabos. Chalice on 2 against Gabos. Chalice on literally anything against Gabos. Obviously, it's very meta-dependent on what it is you exactly want to get out of your Chalice, but Chalice is just a strong card, and it just does the good things that you want to do. Aether Vial. There aren't enough counterspells in Historic for me to think that Aether Vial is valuable as an anti-counter measure. The reason Aether Vial would be fantastic for Death and Taxes is the same reason it's fantastic for Death and Taxes in a bunch of other formats. It allows you to use your lands for other purposes than just playing spells. It also allows you to have flash on creatures that otherwise don't have flash. And you might be saying, Justin, I thought you disliked flash, etc., etc. I do. The thing is, right, this doesn't give cards in your hand flash. You have to get to a point where you have the correct number of charge counters on Aether Vial, and because it's not or less, right, it is equal to the number of charge counters, you have to be very careful about when you take up your Aether Vial. And it adds so much more play, right? You have so many more lines with Aether Vial. Does Aether Vial maybe help other decks too much? Maybe. But one of the right now, other than goblins, there aren't any tier 1 through 3 tribal decks. This will help tribal decks because it allows the tribal decks, like Merfolk, like even vampires, to use their Aether Vials to put things into play, and then they still have interaction, right? What's nice about Aether Vial, or at least adding it into Arena for Historic, is the fact that I'm advocating, and I still strongly advocate, for Muxus to be gone. That card. I don't think it's healthy for the game. If we remove Muxus, right, Goblins has to become a normal tribal Goblin deck that's aggressive, right? That plays some burn as some top end, right? With Aether Vial, it helps them to do that, right? And I would like to see a world where Goblins are viable without using Muxus, right? This would help Merfolk and Elves. I hate both of those decks, but it would help them. It helps, all of the tribes. And what I do like is that it helps Death and Taxes, especially if we get things like Flicker Wisp. Would full-on Death and Taxes. And this is one of the reasons why I love Death and Taxes so much, right? Just because, if you gave Death and Taxes a lot of the tools that it has access to in something like Modern or even, not the Legacy version, you shouldn't give it the lands. The lands in the Legacy version are really where it's at. But even if you give it a lot of the value from the Modern version, that doesn't inherently mean that the deck is going to be great in Historic. Because Death and Taxes is a meta deck, right? It plays off of what the meta is doing. And if the meta is doing very just value-oriented, fair things, Death and Taxes isn't necessarily going to be very good, right? So, I love the Aether Vial. Pithing Needle, I just want to see it. It's a good option for random decks to use. Right now we have Sorcerer Spyglass. We don't have Revoker. We don't have Pithing Needle. I'd like to see those cards. Relic of Progenitus. This is just another, we have a ton of ways of attacking the graveyard. And obviously some are a little bit better than others, but I really just like the ability that Relic gives to a number of decks, maybe decks that aren't playing white. So this is even, not necessarily, good for just Death and Taxes, or even Death and Taxes at all, right? We have Rest in Peace. But allowing these other decks to have some decent graveyard hate means that you can maybe even push graveyard stuff a little bit, or who knows? Ankh of Mystra. When was the last time this card got printed? Let's see. 6th edition. Or the last time this card got printed. So this is not legal in Modern. Modern was 8th edition, I believe. But you know why? I would love Ankh of Mishra. Whenever a land enters the battlefield, Ankh of Mishra deals 2 damage to that land's controller. It's a symmetrical effect, and it really, really only hurts. And it hurts control a decent amount, but it really hurts ramp. This is a way to actually deal with the fact that ramp isn't searched in the libraries nowadays. At least not primarily. It's like, oh, you want to play that Uro, and you want to put this land into play? All right. You do gain 3 life, but you take 2 as well. Maybe they have to. What do they do in Yu-Gi-Oh? They retrain. Maybe they have to retrain Ankh of Mishra. Make a Ankh of. Let's do a Ankh of Obnixilis, right? They make Ankh of Obnixilis. Boom. It's 3 mana now. 3 mana, same effect. Sure, I'd still play it because I hate it. Umezawa Jute should not go to Historic. This card is too good for Historic. Do not put this in the game. God's End. This is the type of equipment that you can put into Historic. This card is not going to break Historic. Whenever equipped creature blocks or becomes blocked by one or more creatures, you may exile one of those creatures. Opponents can't cast cards with the same name as the cards exiled with God's End. Is it a good effect? I guess. It's slow. This costs 3 mana and 3 more to equip it. That is 6 mana for an investment, which is a +3/+3. That's good. Maul of the Skyclaves is a 3 mana investment for a creature immediately getting equipped, gets +2/+2, I think, and has flying and first strike. It does cost 4 to equip, some of which is white, but that initial investment, right, of the 3 mana to immediately equip means that depending on the number of times you plan on re-equipping, which you shouldn't be planning on re-equipping all that often, it means it's comparable. Like, put this card in the game. Sword of Light and Shadow. Notice, this is the only sword on this list. I recognize maybe Sword of Fire and Ice is too good. Maybe Sword of Feast and Famine, too good. Sword of Light and Shadow. You get to gain 3. You're not even hurting your opponent, and you get to return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. This card is not busted. This would be fine to add to Arena. I'm certain of it. Because once again, it's competing with a card that immediately does something. And this card is only even good if we put in Stoneforge. This helps the equipment deck. The equipment decks, which aren't really a thing, especially considering the fact that a lot of the Equipment Matters cards are at the 3 CMC slot anyway. So you have Akiri, you have Danitha, you have Valdruk? Hammerman, the dude who makes elementals, I think. Yeah, so it's not busted. Trinisphere. This card, I just laugh at anyone who's trying to play Nickel Dimey cards. It's great. You just play Trinisphere and you're just like, haha, all your stuff costs more. I'm gonna play Athalia. Fun fact, your stuff costs even more. Honestly, probably not even great because we don't have things like Ancient Tomb or whatever. But still, I like the idea. Batterskull. Might be too strong, but without Stoneforge Mystic, I don't think it's too strong. Even with Stoneforge Mystic, I'm not sure it's too strong. Right? If you're looking at what the rest of the game is doing on Historic right now, like they're just playing Muxus on turn 3 and killing you. They're playing they're playing Uro on turn 3 and gaining life and putting a card in play. And then on turn 4 they're playing Nissa. On turn 5 they're playing Ugin, right? If anything, this no, it doesn't even help against Ugin. The germ is black. Right? Like I don't see how this is unbalanced in the meta right now. Now, if they get rid of if they power down some of those decks, then I can see an argument that this is too strong with Stoneforge Mystic. Without it, it's still a 5 mana, do nothing card. Stone Silence. Above everything else, I want this card on Arena. Well, not everything else, but this card would help alleviate so many issues for me. It shuts down Witch's Oven. It shuts down a lot of the artifact ramp. And maybe those decks don't need to be hammered down anymore, but I want to see them hammered down. I just want to. Stone and Silence just gives you play against some annoying decks. Suppression Field. Activated abilities cost 2 more to play and less than mana abilities. This hurts Planeswalkers. This hurts activated enchantments. This hurts activated artifacts. This hurts lands that aren't just tapping for mana, right? This hurts the Ascanthus of the world, the Vantress of the world, the Lockthwains, the Garen Briggs, right? It hurts all of those. And it hurts them symmetrically. Lightman Field. This one is just funny. because it is a way to deal with goblins that is a little slow for goblins. And I believe it is depicting goblins. Oh, yeah, it is. If you want to kill a lot of goblins, just make sure your defenses look like fun. Boom. 4 mana, enchantment. It's not, the thing is, it's not like they can't see this coming, right? This is a 4 mana card. You have to cast this, like, on rate. We have no way of reducing this, really. There's the 2 mana, 1/2, like Transcendent Envoy, something like that, that can reduce your enchantments by 1. That might even just be auras. I'm not sure. I think there's 1 2 mana card that can reduce generic enchantments by 1. You don't want to play that in Death and Taxes, though, like just for this card. Maybe there's a version that runs more more enchantments, but this is just a way to stop those. The issue with this card is that maybe it's too strong for control things. Because it does kind of just like shut down creatures. Mana Tithe. Why do I want this card into Historic? Because you just get people, right? Imagine just getting someone. You're playing mono white, and your opponent just casts their Muxus, and you're just like, no. It's great. Silence. Hey, opponent, you're not allowed to board wipe me on this turn. Cool. Hey, opponent, you're not allowed to combo me on this turn. It just does some really nice things. It doesn't do nice things. It does mean things. But what it allows you to do is to live in a world where you can allow these combo decks because people have access to answers to them, right? You have Pact of Negation. Pact of Negation doesn't technically mean a bunch if there's not anything to control, right? Like, I don't know how good Force of Will would be in this metagame, right? Force of Will is card disadvantage. The best time to use Force of Will is if you're going to lose. If your opponent is going to cast a card where you lose, it's great, right? Force of Will and Muxus, great. Force of Will and Ura, nah. Force of Will and Nissa, maybe, sure, I could see that. Force of Will and Ugin, for sure, I can see that. Force of Will and Ulamog, no, that is a 4-for-1 against you, right? You lose 2 cards and they exile 2 of your cards. But you know, it means that maybe Wizards can leave some things powered up because people have answers, and that's the thing. That's the issue that I talked about in the previous iteration of this video, and that's the issue I'm talking about now. There are issues with the answers that people have access to in Historic. No issues with threats. Celestial Purge. But Justin, we have Devout Decree. Devout Decree is not Celestial Purge. Celestial Purge is better in every way. Devout Decree, I think I'm thinking of the right card, whatever. I think it's still an instant, but it might be a sorcery. I'm pretty sure it's still an instant. It can only exile a creature or planeswalker. You get to scry one. You know what? No, we're checking. Devout Decree. It's a sorcery, dude. It's a look at this. Same mana cost. Exile target creature or planeswalker that's black or red. Scry 1. This is an instant for the same cost that exiles a permanent that's black or red. Technically speaking, there are differences. I believe this can target any creature or planeswalker. It only exiles them if they're black or red. I believe that's the case on the templating. This can only target a black or red thing. That is not going to matter in Historic. Almost certainly. But more importantly, this card is actually good. Because this card can actually exile things like Embercleave and Goblin things at instant speed. Like the fact that this... Why does Devout Decree exist? Why? Celestial Purge is just objectively a better card. I'm not going to say strictly better, because it is objectively a better card. Reprisal. Another issue, which you'll see in some of these, since these are the kind of instant sorceries, is that white, in general, doesn't have great removal. Right? It has some, you have a Glass Casket, you have Seal Away, I guess. What's that last one? The one with the dinosaur. Who cares? Those are okay, but they're not technically permanent solutions, and they require certain circumstances that I think are generally a little strict. Reprisal isn't necessarily great either, right? Yeah, it can only hit things with power 4 or greater. Can be regenerated, which is nice. It's not really going to matter all that much nowadays, but Reprisal at least I think is a step in the right direction, right? Giving white a means to deal with larger creatures, especially considering the fact that it has, at the 2 CMC slot, ways to deal with smaller creatures. So you have some things to deal with smaller creatures, you have some things to do with the large creatures, and now you don't have answers that are great everywhere, but you do have a couple of answers that are good in certain circumstances. And I think that Reprisal is one that would help Death and Taxes a lot, even, because you can just bring it in against specifically the big green decks. The big green decks that are difficult to deal with. Area Interlude, I just like this card because you get to return exile any number of creatures and return them to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. So this is another way of just dodging board wipes. So your opponent Wrath of God you instant speed Area Interlude, exile your stuff, it'll come back, and the idea is if you have more ETB triggers, which a lot of my decks right now do, because we don't want to run Hushbringer, even though Hushbringer is great generally, as long as Uro is kind of top dog, you don't run Hushbringer. And this would be able to give you extra benefits as well. Sunlands. It's a 1-mana sorcery that deals 3 damage to target non-white creature. I've used this card in Modern before, and it's like decent. It's possibly not great in Historic. Might not even play it. But this gives white a way to bolt birds, which is good. Declaration in Stone. Again, since this is from Shadows of an Innistrad block, this is something that I would suspect is coming soon-ish. And it's fine. They get to investigate. Investigate isn't too backbreaking, but the 2 things against this are the fact that it's 2 mana and it's a sorcery. If it was just 2 mana or it was just a sorcery, I think it'd be usable, but as is, it's a little unfortunate that this is kind of all we have. And this is possible. This is less likely because it's from the Modern Masters or whatever. It's from the list, I don't know. But 2 mana, once again, sorcery. Exile a creature you don't control. For what it's worth, this is better because it's more similar to the black card Legion. Legion, something that you know the card. And this doesn't do that. But its controls just library for basic land card. You don't really want them like this is a worse path to exile. It's technically more balanced because it's a sorcery and it costs 2 mana. But balance is gone, right? Balance is out the window when you consider the fact that white is doing horribly in Historic, and the fact that I'm actually going to Historic metagame. There we go. Where's white at right now? You have Azorius Control, Auras, and Band Control, which is just Azorius Control plus some green, and then you have, I guess, Mono White Prison, but Azorius Control, I think, is mostly blue. Auras, really. Mono White Prison's tier 4. Azorius Control is essentially just, like, blue, mostly. No, it's fine. Sure. But still, like, it's not doing as good as I think it could be, or even should be. And we just, one of the main things is, like, we just don't have the answers for decks that aren't, like, blue splashing control decks. Right, we have Wrath of God. Okay. Don't really want to play that in my creature deck. What do the creature decks have? Nothing, really. Collective Effort. This is another card that could go into creature decks. Tap and untap creature you control. Draw creature power 4 greater. Destroy an enchantment. Put a counter on each creature target player controls. This is good stuff. Being in SOI block means that it's possible we're going to get this, although the fact that it's in a cycle means essentially nothing, considering Wizards didn't print a bunch of cards in a cycle for Amonkhet and Kaladesh Remastered. But this is just another card. Even though it's a 3-mana card and it's a sorcery, the fact that you have a bunch of versatility for it is great. Like, this is something that would be great, and it's an answer for a deck with creatures, right? You can play this and be okay with it in your creature aggro deck, or like Death and Taxes, your creature control deck. It's just would be nice to see a card like this. Council Judgment. Might be too strong, but you get to just choose a thing, even if it has hexproof, and just exile it. and that's great. Sylvian's Reclamation, very unlikely to come to Historic. I just think this one, for what it's worth, is a fun include. You can put this for like your Brawl decks and stuff, which is great. It's not just you know, you can play this in like Reanimator decks, right? If you have some good things that cost 3, you know, this is fine in a situation where you run the 7/6 that makes you discard. I think even the 1 black 5/5 that's from like the arena set, I think that's on cast you have to discard. Like, I think it's as an additional cost you have to discard. So even doing something like that, where early on you discard that card to something else, maybe another version of itself, and then you essentially cast it with this. That's really interesting way to do things, especially considering the fact that you can flash it back and get 2 of them, right? It's similar to Call of the. It's not Call of the Dead. You know the purpley thing from Ikoria. It's similar to that, but different. And the fact that, once again, Death in Texas has a lot of things that are CMC3 or less, means that you can do some cool stuff, especially considering you can like use Ghost Quarter and stuff. This card is never coming to Arena, but I really wish it did. 4 mana. Each player chooses from among the permanents he or she controls an artifact, a creature, an enchantment, a land, and then sacrifices the rest. I just want to punish the decks that are playing garbage. Like, imagine turn 4, your opponent has like your opponent went turn 1 nothing, turn 2 let's say an Explorer, turn 3 an Uro, let's say even turn 4 they do some other ramp of some kind. I don't know what they would do, but they do some. Oh, I guess maybe they'd play Nissa, which wouldn't be great. But you'd have creatures. You'd have at least one like decent creature, right? And then maybe one of those creatures is an artifact creature or an enchantment creature. And then you cast this. You have creatures. Your opponent has land, and then you kill your stupid opponent. And you laugh at their ugly face. This card's never coming to Arena. I just wish it did. Tragic Arrogance, Jesus, is similar, but it doesn't hit land, and it doesn't really do as much as you want because it doesn't hit land. If your opponents are playing a lot of creatures or enchantments or artifacts, then it actually could help, right? Like, this is still fine against the artifact ramp deck, because they often will have multiple artifacts and multiple planeswalkers, and you can pare them down a little bit, and it helps. Counter Souls. We don't really have counterspell problems, so you don't really need Counter Souls. But if you want your tribal decks to get a little bit better, it's fine. I just like a Ganjo Castle. It's cool for Brawl as well. It just helps your legendary creatures in Brawl, but also it just helps out your things like Thalia. It helps out your Kumbals and things. So it's very nice. Flagstones of Trocaire. It's a interesting way to do land destruction, right? Let's say you add something like, I don't know, Boomburst. Then you have Flagstones. Then you have Flagstones, and then you don't care as much. Mishra's Factory and Mutavault are both creature lands that would be really great to see, because it gives Death and Taxes, again, something to do with their lands. For what it's worth, maybe these are too strong for the control decks as well, because control decks is like creature lands, because it is a relatively small investment for a win con where they can devote more of their cards to disruption. Maybe you don't want that, but I personally would prefer Mutavault, because Mishra's Factory is a little bit more defensive, because on defense it can block as a 3/3. You can activate it and then tap itself after you block to give it +1/+1. Whereas Mutavault helps out other trouble decks, which is something that I've talked about throughout this and the other video. I think it's cool. Prismatic Vista actually wouldn't be for Death and Taxes. I want to see Prismatic Vista on Arena, because of the fact that would mean more players are playing fetch lands. And since more players are playing fetch lands, it would make my Ava Mind Sensor a little bit better, and hopefully it would make my Leonin Arbiter a little bit better. Rashad and Port. Is this too strong in Arena? I want to say no, because on Arena, the mana, like the average mana bubble, right? The amount of mana you expect a game to have is going to be larger than Legacy. Land-based mana, I should say. And as such, maybe it's not too bad. Am I advocating for like Death and Taxes to dominate the world? Maybe. And then Tectonic Age, let's just say it. This is just a better version than Field of the Dead in many cases. Not all, but many. And so I'd rather have it. Anyway, this was, I think, a lot shorter than the previous version. And for what it's worth, it makes a ton of sense, considering the fact that the majority of Death and Taxes cards are going to be in this 3 and 2 draft slot. I mean, honestly, if I had to just, I don't know, do a stupid thing where I go by row, I would love to see Giver of Runes, Aether Canonist. Of these, this one's very hard. This is stacked. I'm gonna say Kataki, because we kind of have something like this already. Arbiter, easily. This one's hard. I'm gonna say Selfless Spirit. Here, easy. Spirit of the Labyrinth. Even though I really love Stoneforge Mystic, and I think she would help out a lot, I think Spirit of the Labyrinth is something I would enjoy playing with more. Easily, Brimaz Blade Displacer is a really, really close second. Eldrazi Displacer, Flicker Wisp, easy. This one's not super easy. I would prefer Mangara because it really feels like a Death and Taxes card. But Matter Shaper is probably a little bit better. Recruit of the Guard, easy. Thalia. It's between these two. I'd go with Angel of Finality. Here, I would go with. I'd go with Angel of Jubilation. Honestly, Hikori. Loxodon. Resto Angel, although I really do like the idea of Palashilla, but I think I'd go Resto Angel. Thought-Knot Seer. Blinding Angel. Pentarch. Thalia's Lancers. Sun Titan. Aether Vial. Ankh. Like, easy. Easy Ankh. Sword of Light and Shadow. Stony Silence. Purge. Just because I'm mad. Like, I don't even know if I played this necessarily in Death and Taxes. I hate Devout Decree so much. Probably collective effort. Cataclysm. I'm awful. No one's gonna like this fucking video, dude. It's Cataclysm. Just block the lands. I think Flagstones. Oh man. I'm gonna go with Mutavault by a hair. Like, it's a thin margin on that, but I think I'm gonna go with Mutavault. Anyway, that's the end of the video. I hope you all have enjoyed it. I'd like to thank my lovely patrons, especially Fogwind, Malik, and Balater, for the continued support. If you'd like to join them and support the show, you'll find links in the description below. Hope, of course, you've enjoyed this video. Like, comment, subscribe, all the good stuff. And, of course, until next time, I will be one.